IVM.
हेलो। अब हमने ना काफ़ी सारे ऐसे भर के जो है गप्पे मारे डिस्कशन किए हैं हमारे फूड के ऊपर, इंग्रेडिएंट्स के ऊपर, क्या खाना है क्या नहीं खाना है, इत्यादि एटसेट्रा। बट टुडे वी हैव लाइक न्यू थिंग टू डिस्कस व्हिच इज टू टॉक अबाउट डेटा, क्योंकि हर डेटा कुछ कहता है और ये डेटा, ये ट्रेंड क्या कहता है, इसके लिए एक अमेजिंग सी फूड क्रॉनिकलर हैं, culinary राइटर भी हैं और फूड एक्सपर्ट तो हैं ही, और मतलब बच्चे बूढ़े जवान सब इनको जानते हैं। और मेरी एक ऐसे मेंटर टाइप का भी है, इनको पैसे वैसे मैं देता नहीं हूँ मेंटर बनने के लिए, बट है वो मेरी मेंटर। तो रुशीना, वेलकम टू नान खारी पॉडकास्ट। ये आपका सेकंड एपिसोड है और मुझे तो बहुत आ रहे होंगे आपको, अरे हमें तो आ रहे हैं तो अब तो घर की बात हो गई है कि अब आप ऐसे आके हमारे साथ ट्रेंड के ऊपर गप्पे मारे। सो या, welcome to Naan Curry.
Hi, Sadaf. Thank you so much for having me over again.
अब तो घर की बात है।
और बुलाया करो, साल रुकाते हो फिर।
हाँ तो ऐसे मतलब इतना भी, इतनी भी घर की बात नहीं है। दामाद थोड़ी हैं आप हमारे।
उससे ज्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट है, but let's not go in that direction.
That is true. So what is chronicler, Rushina? For people who don't understand English?
Well, essentially, chronicler or culinary chronicler is a term that I coined somewhere in 2017 because I realized that the food space and the food media space were evolving very fast. We had so much happening in terms of, new platforms coming out, and any one person who was documenting food in any format, whether it was you writing a blog or me writing a book or articles for newspapers or people taking pictures, photography, illustrations. All of these things were no longer enough in isolation. We all had to start taking pictures also, writing content also, if we were so inclined to draw also, because media platforms required multimedia inputs. So labels like food writer, food blogger, food photographer became limiting. Chronicling essentially means recording events in a certain time and place. So by default, a culinary chronicler becomes somebody who is recording information about food in a certain time and place. And these chronicles become references in the future. Like today we refer to, say, Kehta or any of these historical documents. But it's not just about history. It's also recording information of all kinds. Data, like you're saying. So even all the existing government data, that all becomes a form of chronicling. But what culinary chronicling also, in the sense of what I promote and propagate, is basically bringing together data, research, but writing it in a format that is more, translatable for lay people. So it brings together academic research, it brings together oral recording of testimony, and then it brings together crafting using English or other languages or other forms like illustration or photography or even podcasting, which is a very strong future form of chronicling. It brings together all these disciplines and crafts it into content that's acceptable and understandable by lay people.
Correct. I also learned a new word called revivalist, cultural revivalist. So I'm like, oh, that's an interesting word. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and I can see it becoming a thing in future.
So, I mean, before we talk about the data trend per se, एक data नहीं है, well, in a way data trend है modern time में. Especially, I think the question is because of chronicling itself, not related to the trend part. How do you see chronicling in this age of AI? हर किसी ने ऐसा चैट जिपड़ी बोल के दिमाग का जिपड़ी कर दिया है. तो in the age of AI, how do you see chronicling? Is it aiding? Is it taking away things? I don't know. I'm just curious.
So I haven't explored AI enough, but I see phenomenal potential in it because I'm married to a design dude who is always talking about all these things, and he's gaga over this whole chat GPT and what the possibilities are. And I'm thinking of a future where we can actually bring history alive. Like, how you and I talk about, say, for example, what was Rampur cuisine like? I see a future where we could actually bring alive through AI and illustration a sort of room that you could walk around in virtually and explore a Rampur kitchen or watch things being cooked or something like that. it will bring very interesting layers that will allow us to bring things alive, perhaps, in a way we've not been able to so far. So I think every new media platform that comes up, eventually man is a creative animal, right? We'll figure out how to make something work out of
I
it.
just have two things. One very funny and one which is how food should go as well. A little while back I was just testing ChatGPT. So I was talking about tea. And I mentioned about write an essay on tea with poetic references and all that, right? So it gave me two beautiful poems. One was by Faiz Ahmed Faiz and the other one was by Harivansh Rai Bachchan. And I was so impressed and they looked so poetic and so beautiful. But I'm like, acha, 2 line to pad liya hai. I want to know the whole thing. So I started looking it up. I couldn't find them. Both Harivansh Rai Bachchan as well as Faiz Ahmed Faiz. For Faiz Ahmed Faiz, I went on Kehta. I tried to find. I'm looking it up. पूरी इंटरनेट की गलियां खंगाल मारी मैंने. है ही नहीं, एग्जिस्ट ही नहीं करता है. So I'm like, oh, ChatGPT.
Created?
It was all created. So yeah.
Wait, that is going to be a very weird,
So that's
strange
a problem in
then.
general. I think a lot of people, especially with the history part, a lot of issues has come. But yeah, when you talk about AI, I think I'm seeing that trend as well. That people are trying to use these tech or hologram as well. For example, Z Fort. If you go to that fort now, there's a new thing which they've opened up. It's an experience center. It doesn't use AI per se, but it has a holographic thing. So when you walk inside that experience center, you will know how that fort came to be, right? And it just showcases everything properly. Things just move and then says what happened in the Mughals time, how, and then you're literally just there. You're just looking at it, experiencing it, and trying to relive that era, that how Mughals perhaps created this and how then English came and then they destroyed the whole of it and then what happened. So it's beautiful. So I think maybe you put on like a glass and then you get into food world. You'll not get to taste it, but who knows? We'll do a pop-up where you see the food and you taste the food.
Yeah, I mean, you could very easily, like, I don't know if you heard about this Van Gogh exhibit that's happening in Bombay just now, where they've got all this light and sound and Van Gogh. I haven't been to it, but I mean, why not have a background like that? And then we actually have a table in the middle where people are eating the food that, and the stories are playing out. I mean, you know, it's fascinating. And, you know, I started my career in a time when we were paid by the word. So it was like, 1 word, 1 rupee, 2 rupees per word, and जितना लंबा लिखते थे उतने पैसे मिलते थे.
अब तो नहीं मिलते.
अब तो it's like एक 90-second reel के लिए आपको पता नहीं कितने पैसे मिल सकते हैं. But I mean, content formats have always changed. And I think that is the beauty of, you know, the creative animal that man is, that we take different mediums and we create new things out of them.
Content is never content. कम वक्त हमेशा ही कुछ न कुछ फसाद देता है. कभी भी content ही content नहीं है. खैर. So now let's talk about the trends. Let's talk about data and everything happening. India 2023. How are you seeing India contributing food? I mean, अभी संजीव कपूर ने ऐसा बिल्कुल बवाल मचाया है. क्या तुम बकवास सर्व कर रहे हो एयर इंडिया पे, उन्होंने बोल दिया. If you look it up, there's a food, some sandwich which was being served, and Sanjeev Kapoor took a picture and then tweets and says, "Kya wahiyat khana bana do?" But that had a global impact in general because Sanjeev Kapoor is saying it. But how are you seeing India, you know, in a more serious way, contributing to the world? If you think world as a pot, then where does India stand and how are India's giving food?
Well, what we've observed at the Godrej Food Trends Report, and this is like 6 years in existence, what we've observed is that there's been a phenomenal shift in the position of India when it comes to food, from that stereotyping of curry and spicy and cheap food, which you kind of get for $4-5, you get an entire buffet abroad, with a homogenization of flavors, with a stereotyping of concepts. It's been changing, especially in during and after the pandemic. Voices celebrating the diversity and plurality of Indian food have come to the forefront. As consumers, the whole world was looking at food much more. And in India, what was happening was we as Indians focused on our food. Okay, that globally for the last few years, we've had conversations happening around things like yoga, turmeric, coconut as a superfood. And all of those conversations were, you know, in single focus in a sense. But what's been also happening is chefs and restaurants, like the Dhamaka restaurant, chefs have been slowly driving a revolution in the West. Indian chefs have been slowly driving a revolution where we are no longer apologetic about our food. We're owning it, and we're, sort of proud of it, and we're showcasing it the way it should be instead of Frenchifying it or Europeanizing it, or, we're like, okay, ye hum hai, aur acha laga to laga, nahi laga to bye-bye. Which is a great thing, I think. What's also happening is, parallelly, there's a lot of conversations and focus on health. And we are realizing traditional medicine systems, traditional diet systems like Ayurveda, Unani medicine. And I'm not limiting that conversation to India itself. There's also traditional medicine systems like the Chinese ones and things like that. These are whole food matrices. What we are realizing is that Indian food or any cuisine, especially these medicine systems like China and India, diet systems as well, don't look at food as just sustenance. It's medicine as well. So it's preventative medicine. If you look at any aspect of traditional cuisine, we'll see the way we eat, the ingredients that came on the plate, seasonal eating, jo Ayurveda mein dincharya, ritucharya, these were all patterns and rituals and routines that were set down by ancient wise people for us to live in a certain environment. And it wasn't only about the calories or the fiber and fat that the food put on our plate. It was also about the functional ingredients, the functional properties of those foods that came together. So the spices that we put into our food, the turmeric is a classic example. You get enough turmeric in your traditional Indian diet if you're eating 2 proper dal, bhat, roti, sabzi meals in a day to keep your immune system at level. ये अलग बात है कि हम turmeric latte का पता नहीं क्या, we started consuming a lot of turmeric during the pandemic because of all the fear. But your traditional diets were built to keep you immune to the weather. So, our seasonal diet changes. You eat warming foods in winter, cooling foods in summer. The spices you use change. I won't get too much into the details, but it was a whole food matrix. And it was about ingredients, but it was about when they were consumed, what combinations they were consumed in. And this whole food matrix is something that we will see a lot of conversations around. What's happening is there's health conversations happening. There's plant-based food as a future solution to hunger and food scarcity happening. And there is taste and flavor without compromising on health. These are all parallels that are driving focus towards India because people are realizing that we have all the answers in India. It's just that they've not been documented. So there's no written documentation, but there's a lot of that happening now as well.
So you mentioned about Godrej Food Trends, and we'll come to that in a moment because I don't know what Godrej Food Trends Report is, and people who are listening as well. But like my co-host, you met him already, Archit talks about the intermittent intermission interval fasting, whatever, intercourse, I don't know, whatever it is, I can't pronounce it. Intermittent fasting. Yes.
Yeah. It's intermittent fasting, Sadaf. If you say intercourse, it means a whole other thing which Archit will not be very pleased with.
Class 12th, course is course. So class 12th ka course ho gaya intercourse.
Okay, fine. Yeah, like boyfriend, girlfriend.
So intermittent fasting. Now, a modern trend or a fad, plant-based thing, trend or fad. So काफी वैसे ही है. And that's what I want to understand. Then what separates both these things? What is a fad and what is a trend?
A fad is something momentary, first of all. I'll separate these two. There's 2 questions in this actually. So the fad and the trend bit. A fad is a momentary thing. A lot of things that happen on TikTok are fads, not trends. Trends are often things that take a while to build. So in fact, what I should have concluded with in my previous answer was that what we've been observing over 6 years of mapping trends in India is that in 2018, with our first edition, we observed just the first few conversations around regional cuisine. These then sort of grew into deeper conversations on micro-regional cuisine as we realized that, a Maharashtrian cuisine was not only Maharashtrian, it could mean many different communities and regions within Maharashtra. Over the 6-year period, what we've seen is last year we saw there was a sort of renaissance of Indian cuisine in a way that it had never been before. Globally, the world was looking at India and recognizing that Indian cuisine was breaking its stereotypes. Internally, we were exploring our own food like we never had before. What we've realized in all of these last 5 sort of exploring food is that today the world is looking at India and as an atlas of food. So where it started with one turmeric or one coconut oil, but today we've got millets as a mainstream conversation. And millets, there's nobody richer in millets, I feel, than India in terms of both growing them and using them. So India is going to be viewed as an atlas of food, and we are, as collectively as Indians as well as global citizens, going to be exploring those different diverse plant-based foods in a way that we've never done before. Now to come to, so that's a trend that's been growing. It started as regional cuisine, and today we're looking at India being recognized as an atlas of food. A fad, on the other hand, is something as tiny as in 2018 we saw bowl meals becoming a thing. So they became a thing for a bit and then they stopped. And then now suddenly, because of Instagram, they seem to be back in focus because they're very pretty to make. But they come and go. And then sometimes you'll have something even more fleeting like the charcoal food, black food, whatever it was, which was basically essentially burnt food. Activated charcoal. So, yeah. So those, in my opinion, are fads. They pop up, they have some novelty value, and aaj ki date mein, with Instagram being the primary medium, I think sensationalism is the biggest thing. Like what is happening to street food in India just now because of that is ridiculous. And you know, because you're the one who's sharing all the Vayad stories of... Yeah, exactly. So that's the difference, in my opinion, between trends and fads. Trends are long playing and keep growing. Fads come and go, die out. Trends, in my opinion, also need to prevail over a larger consumer data set and be more resonant on a global level.
So, because I was having this conversation with my brother. Bubble tea in India, a fad or a trend? One word answer.
It's a fad that's come and gone.
Okay. So now you're saying it's a fad, right? I'm just curious, because it's a legit drink in some other country. So then would you call it trend or a fad?
I would still call it a fad because it's a very small data set of people that will really get into bubble tea.
But I'm saying is...
And by the way, 2016, 2017, mein bubble tea came and went
it's coming back again. That's the problem. I don't like bubble tea.
So see, these things come and go. They come and go. And tea is big just now. So obviously then all aspects of tea will see traction as well. These are all modern day trends that the West has come up with. Okay. Just like curry was a word that the West coined to describe a certain concept. Intermittent fasting is something that we have traditionally practiced in Indian culinary culture for years. You slept at a certain time. What they call the circadian rhythm. What Ayurveda describes as dincharya. जो आपका routine होना है चाहिए दिन का of sleeping, eating, also going to the loo, big aspect of Ayurveda. That is essentially describing what you should do to be optimally healthy, draw the best energy from your eat, sleep, exercise cycle. And within it, the pattern of eating actually takes care of your intermittent fasting. So it existed. It was just not coined as a separate name because there was no need for it. Plant-based food. India is the most biodiverse country in the world. We have more edible plants and more plurality and diversity in terms of plant-based food than any other country in the world. Because every culinary culture came to be based on what was the most abundant food source. So जहाँ meat ज़्यादा होता था, it became a meat-based culinary culture. जहाँ seafood ज़्यादा होता था, it became a seafood-based culinary culture. India, our richest resource is plants. So if you look at it, every aspect of your meal, if you just visualize a thali, whether it's in your house where there is perhaps a little bit more meat eaten than in my house where perhaps more vegetables are on the plate, you will see that almost all parts of it except for the meat component and ghee is plant derived. Your dal or protein comes from plants. Your fiber comes from vegetables, which are plants again. Even the cooking mediums and the flavorings, the spices and the oils we use are all plant-based seed oils. Except for ghee, which comes from animals. And, of course, the meat and fish and chicken and whatever that is eaten in various cuisines that depend on those things as plant-based protein. But even there, अगर आपका मीट आपके प्लेट पे हो तो उसमें 3-4 टुकड़े होंगे, but gravy will be based on plant ingredients. pyaz, tomato, whatever. So I would say easily that 85% of the food on our plate is plant-based, with a little bit of meat coming in where there is a meat-based cuisine. So by that definition, we are a plant-forward cuisine. And because it's been our biggest resource, so all these 4 plant-based foods that you see coming in today are essentially modern-day versions of gatta, dal dhokli, pithod of Rajasthan. So we already have a huge repertoire of 4 plant food. Your buddies and papads also, in my opinion, come into that category because these are all supplementary foods made out of plants. A lot of them are protein power sources and even when you spread into the protein, आजकल वो protein balls मिलते हैं ना, they're just modern day laddus. हमारा बेसन का लड्डू भी तो प्रोटीन लड्डू था.
Archit, I despise or hate this term. हमने हमारा तुमने लड्डू लेके बोलते प्रोटीन बॉल्स प्रोटीन बाल्स लड्डू बोलो उसको. What is wrong? Yeah.
My pet peeve, by the way, is water balls.
Yes.
Pani puri.
That's
का अंग्रेजी नाम.
वो अलग ही है वो तो मैं any pani puri which costs more than $50, I say no to it. मतलब by rule. कोई भी मोमो 50 रुपए 60 रुपए से ऊपर मांगना मैं देता मैं खाता हूँ. कम से कम अगर मैं 200 का मोमो खा रहा हूँ मेरे को डिमसम सुनाई देना चाहिए कम से कम. That's how I 50 रुपए से ऊपर देता मैं. So खैर, so tell me one thing, ये सब जो खुफिया इन्फॉर्मेशन आप लेके आ रहे हो, ये क्या सोर्स क्या है इसका, कौन दे रहा है आपको ये सब, किससे बातें कर रहे हो आप, कहाँ उठना बैठा चल रहा है आपका, और what is this Godrej Food Trends Report?
Okay, मेरा खुफिया नेटवर्क जो है has tentacles all over the country and abroad. I have a database of 400 people who have replied to the survey that we sent out this year. So it comes from real people across verticals in the Indian food industry, but we also reach out now to people who are Indians doing great things in different parts of the world. So to be more serious, because otherwise Godrej मुझे मारने को आएगा.
Serious बातें करनी है. खाली एक काम करिएगा, गोदरेज पे सदफ हुसैन नाम लिखा चाकू भेज दिए बस, बाकी अपन ठीक है, आगे बढ़िए.
उनके पास बाय द वे चाकू की अपनी कंपनी है.
उनकी कंपनी की चाकू चाहिए मेरे को. हाँ, और भी हम डिमांड अमेज़न पे जाके ढूंढ लेंगे क्या क्या सामान चाहिए मेरे को. बट हाँ, serious conversation. Yes.
Yeah. So the Godrej Food Trends Report is basically thought leadership program that Godrej began 6 years ago. They have their own publishing platform called Vikroli Kuchina. And these activities are all programs and activities to drive conversations in the food space, to bring people together, to create conversations, to see where the business is going. The Food Trends Report in particular is a qualitative and a quantitative survey that is actually, we have 2 survey forms that go out to people. And we collect data out of that. And that is then sliced both in terms of numbers as well as in terms of qualitative thoughts. And that whole thing comes together in the form of a report. This report basically draws on anywhere between, like we started was only 40 people, but it's grown over time. This year, we've clocked in about 400 respondents from across the country, from across different verticals. We try to get as much representation as we can. And interestingly, since you mentioned Women's Day, I want to tell you that I'm very proud to share that this time we've got equal or more representation from women in our report, which is something I've worked specifically towards because I feel Indian women are not well represented in the food industry of India. So I think more or less, if I'm right, every page or almost every page has 2 women and 2 men.
Wonderful. Proper balance of diversity. Yeah. Godrej के DEI department बहुत खुश होएगा.
I hope so.
So okay. So but then you talked about this started 6 years back, right? And I want to understand that when it started 6 years back and now, what is this one trend that you have seen has been constant and that hasn't changed? So you mentioned about the micro and the regional cuisine, but anything beyond which hasn't changed at all? Like इंसान पानी पी रहा है वही वाला पानी पी रहा है, तो क्या change नहीं हुआ है?
The conversations around cooking fat hasn't. It's always been prevalent. Kaun sa cooking fat is good for us? The varieties. I think last year the trend that came out was that we were recognizing that a rotation of dietary fats was really important. This year we've realized or we've observed that people are now recognizing the importance of the fact that cooking mediums that they grew up with, our own kachi gani ke tel, ghee, over the fancy stuff or the exotic quote unquote oils that have been marketed so prolifically in India, like olive oil, for example. Yeah. So we are realizing, because again, I think it all ties into that whole concept of plurality. We are recognizing plurality. So जहाँ एक टाइम पे हमारे घर में perhaps 2 या 3 फैट होते थे, घी होगा ही होगा, एक रिफाइंड ऑयल होगा और एक जो भी हमारा लाइक नॉर्थ में मस्टर्ड ऑयल होगा, साउथ में तिल का तेल होगा. आज आप अगर हाँ, and if you look in your shelf today, you'll probably have more quantities of oils. You'll have some olive oil because you'll be doing some Italian cooking or salads. अगर आपको साउथ ईस्ट एशिया में इंटरेस्ट है तो टोस्टेड सेसमी ऑयल होगा. अगर आप थोड़े से भी हेल्थ फ्रीक है तो क्या पता हेम्प का तेल होगा. So we are using more different dietary fat, and we are recognizing that those dietary fats that come from our own traditional cuisines actually are better for us, no matter how well other things are marketed.
Interesting. I mean, as you were talking about oil, I was just thinking what kinds of oil I have in my kitchen. I'm just thinking. So there is, of course, there's sunflower, some refined oil. Then there's
some basic cooking oil.
Correct. Then there is mustard oil, because we have Biharis. So we have mustard oil. We have ghee, of course. There is olive oil. Yes, Evo. There is hemp oil as well. Not big, but it's really small, like a 250 ml. There's also avocado oil. I got someone gave me avocado oil, so I had that as well. There's also almond oil. There's coconut oil. और बाथरूम में पड़ा है वो बालों में लगाने के लिए, चंपी करने के लिए अलग ऑयल. कौन सा है? ऐसे कुछ तो फैंसी सा ऑयल. दाढ़ी में लगा, बहुत ऑयल है मेरे पास.
Now you even get weird oils.
वैसे अमेरिका मालूम चला, हमारे घर में छापा मार दिया, इतने तेल है हमारे पास. ओहो, खाली पेट्रोल ही नहीं है, वरना पेट्रोल गाड़ी में घर में नहीं है, बट हाँ वो काफी सारे ऑयल्स हैं. So as you said, that fat conversation has always been there, but how is this sort of the 23 edition or 2023 edition of Godrej Food Trends, is it different than the one that you have worked in the past already?
Yes, it is very different, and I think so Sujit Patil, who is basically my boss at Godrej, who drives the entire Godrej Food Trends concept and has been very supportive of all my madness all these years, once told me that it will take you 5 years to make this report what you want. And I truly believe that is making sense to me now, because last year we did our 5th edition. So until the 5th edition, our report was always a survey, and we basically put all the data that we collected. So our surveys basically went out. There's about anywhere between 10 to 12 questions with multiple choices, which people have to pick what they feel are going to be popular in the year to come. So that gives us our statistics, the numbers. And then there is there's a box where they have to give us their qualitative opinion on why they've picked those top three choices for each question. So this survey goes out every year, and then we collect all that data, and then we start breaking it down into various different things. So until year 5, our report was basically a summation of that survey. So all the questions, the top trends, all the questions. In year 5, I felt that we needed to change or value add to the survey, and we decided to do a commemorative 5th edition special collector's edition. And so what I did was I went back to the last 5 years and I analyzed what had been topics in the previous 5 years. And from that, we drew out 8 topics, and we did deep dive essays that looked back as well as forward in those concepts. So we looked at, for example, in the 5th edition, we looked at the consumption of dietary fats, because that had been a prevalent conversation. We looked at the immense rise of chicken as an animal protein on the plate in India. We looked at the revival of desi vegetables. We looked at Indian fermentation, and these were all driven by prevalent conversations. We looked at the revival of traditional bartans coming back. And these essays became a whole new feature that we added to the survey. All of this was very well received, because now it went beyond the survey and it gave you a lot more information that you could keep coming back to if you were someone in the Indian food industry. And we were very happy at the response. We felt it really completed the package. So this year in 2023, the value addition to these two things is based on feedback from many people, including yourself.
Of course.
One of the things that we've added is toolkits. So there are summaries for every essay. There are suggestions on how you can action things out of that essay. There are toolkits for content creators on hashtags you can use, on days you can celebrate, on content you can create based on the topics that we've covered. We also have included summaries and ways to use the survey data, because a lot of people had said that, we would like more ideas on how to apply the statistical data that you have. So I feel that this year we've come full circle. We've completed the package that we can deliver to people who read the report. So we've got the data, we've got a lot of interesting reading, and then we've also got ways to apply. Another very big aspect that I'm very proud of the 2023 report is our regional overview section has now become a regional perspective section. And we have covered a large number. I think we've managed to cover every state in India with a single individual voice telling us what are the trends prevalent on ground in terms of dining in, dining out, snacking. That I think, and you are part of that because you helped us with inputs for Bihar.
Yes, I'm about to come, but I am just there.
Yeah, so that I think is a very, very rich new addition to the next report. Of course, I mentioned the fact that we have more women across the board in this year's report.
I think अभी अर्चित होता उसको मजा ही आया था उनको बिल्कुल उसके लिए तो बिल्कुल ईयरगैज़म हो रहा है ये तो बिल्कुल इतना डेटा बात हो रहा है. Tell me one thing. I wrote about this earlier this year that nostalgia has its own flavor, and I won't say it's the best thing, but it has a different connotation. I don't think any nostalgic food can ever be compared just because of flavor, right? I don't think flavor is the marker when it comes to nostalgic food. So how have you seen this trend over the period of time, or in 2023? Also because last year, Shark Tank India, I remember, and there was this one lolly company which came out, and then they were selling nostalgia as well, and they had all shark deals. They like some huge funding that they got. So how does nostalgia play as a trend?
So everything about food is at some level connected to our emotions. There's lots of science around and lots of research around how food can make you happy, sad, and it's entirely individual in a sense, because something that makes me really excited could make you feel like, yuck, I don't want to eat that. So food is directly connected to emotion and gratification. That's where comfort food comes from. That's where we look for comfort in, foods that we ate perhaps in our childhood or something that associates with happy times. And therefore, if you look around, there's lots of crazy stuff happening with nostalgia. Nostalgia foods are being reinvented by chefs. We saw that a little bit with things like comfort food a few years ago, but now there's a whole new twist happening on it. And it's always been prevalent. Nostalgia comes and goes. I think what has happened is that the last 2 years of being confined to home by the pandemic also created a bit of siege mentality in all of us. And, the fear, the isolation, the doubt on what is the future going to bring. And then with the current economic status that we have, there's a lot of insecurity in us. And this is a time when then you go back to security, comfort, and food is one of the easiest ways to find that. And therefore, we are seeing, there's like all sorts of things happening where candies are coming out with new twists on old ideas, foods that, we enjoyed. I mean, your recent article on Maggie is a classic example of how Maggie has appealed to generations across the board. So, what has happened is that we are, and whichever generation we're looking at, whether we're looking at Gen Z, millennial, everybody has some food that they respond to in that form of nostalgia. And what's happened is the food industry has tapped into this idea. And so now that you're seeing a lot of innovation that brings nostalgia onto the plate. Sometimes it could be as simple as to illustrate an idea. And sometimes it could be something that is a retro theme that will inspire restaurant decor or packaging. There's digital collectibles that are becoming available. And you see home chefs, small businesses, restaurants, writers, journalists covering food from the nostalgia perspective across the board. It's become, when I say nostalgia has become a flavor, I mean that we are finding inspiration in it. And as people in the business, we are figuring out ways to make it work for us to drive business.
So going back to the question that in the beginning I asked, I am somebody who writes on nostalgia as well, so I am guilty of that. But do you think the nostalgia becomes like one of the fads? Because everybody's writing it, everybody's doing it, everybody's creating a video or something out of it, and hence I must jump on the ship.
No, because first of all, I don't think you should feel guilty at all. Because for any of us who successfully delivers nostalgia to our consumers, we are giving them a moment of joy. So why would we feel guilty about that? And it's calorie-free joy, right? Because you're eating about it. You're not eating extra butter, cheese, sugar, or any of that stuff. So none of us should feel guilty about it. As far as fad and trend, I don't think nostalgia is a fad. I think nostalgia is a long playing trend that ebbs and flows. Sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up. Usually the highs of nostalgia trending would be parallel to insecure circumstances, sadness, things like that. I mean, currently we've got a war being fought somewhere. There's an earthquake that's happened somewhere. There's a lot of sadness in the world. So you will see a lot of happy stuff coming out as well. So it's going to be a trend that ebbs and flows.
But
always.
in 23, based on your research and all, what would be the one nostalgic food that you think will either your opinion or the data that you have worked on, which will take over this nation, apart from chawal dal?
I wouldn't say nation, Sadaf, honestly, because our nation is so diverse.
Bombay only there?
No, what I will say is, I think ice cream is definitely something that it's been growing since last year. So it's definitely going to be big. You will see different avatars of ice cream, everything from, because we are so nostalgic about ice cream, we will see ice cream in, modern protein supplemented way. Format, but also traditional flavors, and then you'll see mithai crossing over into ice cream, and then snacking has become such a huge thing that we will see a lot of. It's easy to pick up an ice cream and have it as a snack as an individual person. So ice cream will cross over into snacking as well.
That's what I wanted to come to, was snacking only. Because the also reason I'm snacking because a couple of days back we did one of the episodes was on snacking itself, biting with the author Shizo, and we talked about Gujarati snacking. And I have never heard this word called katak patak. You might have. Have you heard of katak patak? So it's a Gujarati word apparently, which means knick-knack, chatter-patter, and that translates into biting, which for me was a new word. But what I wanted to understand was there's one ice cream snack, and one of him, you also know, one of my friend Chef Suvir Saran, and his partner Vardhan, they have something called Cold Love, and they have this bonbon ice cream, which I put as a snack, because 5-6 bonbons you pick up and then you just munch. It's expensive in your pocket, but less calories, so to speak. So guilt-free, sort of, quote unquote. But how is snacking then changing? Again, going back to the Shark Tank, because I watch Shark Tank a lot these days. Going back to Shark Tank, there's so many snack companies coming in. All of them are claiming that we are the healthy ones. That there are a few who come and say, we are not healthy. This is hamari maa ke haath ka snack. So there's a Guju snack, there's Maharashtra snack, there's Delhi snack. But that, I mean, just looking at Shark Tank only gives me a lot of these trends. So how do you see snacks?
So I'm so happy you asked me this question, because this is where chronicling, this is a classic example of chronicling. We have an essay this year on snacking, the evolution of snacking in India. Now, data says that snacking has been growing for the last couple of years. It's been accelerated by the pandemic because, again, being home, and even post-pandemic, the flexible schedules with someone going to school, someone going to work, meant that meal times were skewed. And snacking became a great sort of solution, because you could put it into someone's tiffin, or if someone had a break between meetings, they could quickly take a snack. So you started stocking up on a variety of snacks. In our house as well, we saw that, because I had 2 kids who were forever hungry, especially during lockdown. And snacks became a great solution to have on hand, because how many times could you really go and cook, right? And also the drudgery of cooking. At one point, the novelty wore off, and we were juggling cooking and work and keeping house and everything. And again, snacks became an indulgence, a comfort food. So they started infringing into our meal times. So there's again many factors that have been working towards bringing snacks into massive focus. But we have to understand is India is basically hardwired towards snacks. So that whole story of the kacha khana, pakka khana, tala hua jo khana hota tha, it was a form of preserving food. And it evolved in our climate, which is very prone to microbial interventions in food, as a way to preserve and lengthen the shelf life of food. So, you know, your travel foods, your snacks between meals always existed, and they were typically either roasted things like chana or murmura or makhanas, or they were something deep fried like your chaknas samosa. Or, you know, and the samosa, classic example, the samosa, pakoda. And, you know, there is, I don't think there's any other cuisine in the world or any other culinary culture in the world with as rich a repertoire of snacks. Because you have Gujarati farsan, you have the South Indian contingent of murukus and all the chakna that comes out. Every region has got its own repertoire of snacks. A lot of them are quite nutritionally balanced as well, because they're typically made out of dense ingredients like besan, which is high protein. And I don't subscribe to this whole deep fried is bad for you concept. I feel that we have to stop vilifying foods.
I know.
It's not the food's fault. Yeah, you're the one who's making the bad choices.
You're the one who's making the food and you're the one who's eating the food and yet complaining. Complaints, I tell you.
So coming back to the mudde ki baat, as you would say, we are hardwired towards snacking. So giving us options, whether you sort of market it as healthy or you market it as a chatpata or you market it as vegan or whatever, you're just giving me more options to try and indulge. We have reached a stage where we've realized that we like flexible lifestyles. Snacking allows individual preferences to come to the table. Like in my house, we have 4 people with different tastes. In your house also, it's the same. Different people require. So for example, I don't eat sugar. So I can opt for snacks that are high on flavor and, you know, low on sugar. But my kids don't need to. So they can go for something like, you know, a sweeter option with maybe good or something like that. So what's happening is that the industry is innovating like crazy to create snacks in various categories. Our idea of snacking is evolving. So convenience is always going to be top of mind. And the other thing that will always be top of mind is taste. So what is happening is that we also have innovation happening that's giving us crispy chatpata without the oil because it's air fried, or, you know, roasted makhanas. And at the same time, you have highly indulgent, high on salt kind of options coming out of FMCG companies. So, and you have ridiculous flavors coming out. It's crazy. Like, you should just look at chips. You have, like, every region you go to, there'll be, of course, you have your typical peri-peri, sour cream and onion and all that. But you have, like, here in my local shop, I get chole, Amritsari chole flavor and pani puri flavor and pata nahi. And it's in, and the chips themselves, aloo ka chips bhi hota hai, but baked or roasted bhi mil jayega, aur aapko kand ka chips bhi mil jayega, aur millet ka chips bhi mil jayega. So whatever you are looking for today to gratify you, with health, with taste, with indulgence, with comfort, there is somebody producing it.
It's interesting. So, I mean, I always think that irrespective whether you're following a diet or not, whether you are the sort of, you know, over-the-top eater, you would eat everything, or you're just decent eater. Like, I call myself as a decent eater because I eat decent. I don't go overboard all the time. But एक मसला जिंदगी में आता है सारे के खाने वालों का कि देखो सुबह तो चल गया, दोपहर खाना पीना हो गया, शाम का जो 4 से 6 जो स्नैकिंग टाइम है ना, इसको कैसे कंट्रोल करेगा आदमी? So I'll tell you, I do 3 things, and it's interesting to do. And when we talk about the snacking, right? I have really roughly 6-8 months that I discovered this Haldiram ka bhel puri. Oh, it's so damn good. मैं ऐसे बना रहा हूँ, पेपर उसमें प्याज टमाटर काटा, ready. ठीक है, हेल्दी का हेल्दी हो गया, उस पर कितना डीप फ्राइड कितना नहीं है पता नहीं है, लेकिन हाँ, that becomes my thing, right? Second, if I want, like, you know, if I'm sitting at a coffee shop, for example, and having my coffee, Now, I don't want to eat sugar or something of that sort because, as I said, I'm also growing old. So, बूढ़े होते time आप थोड़ा मीठा कम खाते हैं, है ना? तो then I was like, क्या खाया जाए? Then there's a new thing in the market, whole truth का वो bar, snack bar या फिर protein bar. So then थोड़ी guilt भी कम होती है, चलो उस पर sugar नहीं है. Whole truth is a company which I like. I think Archit we both like it. तो हमने काफी बार जिक्र भी किया उसका. तो वो हो जाएगा. अच्छा, एक नई चीज आ गई है मार्केट में, समोसा पार्टी. There is this new brand which has come up. Now, ये कम्बख्त जो है ना, ये बिल्कुल निगोड़े. They make samosa, tiny samosa. कि खाओ भी, गिल्ट भी कम होगा. महंगा है, महंगे है, लेकिन गिल्ट कम होगा. तो if at home, I'm like, यार समोसा खाने का मन कर रहा है. ठीक है, मतलब like, यार पूरा नहीं खा पाऊंगा. So क्या किया जाए, समोसा पार्टी ऑर्डर करो. So then they're like these really tiny samosas, which are like 10 samosa, tiny samosas, which would cost you like 200 rupees. Expensive, but guilt थोड़ा कम हुआ. तो ये what you talking about it, कि आप इस तरीके के भी people are playing with your psyche as well, that खा के जाओगे तुम.
No, but there's also one very quintessential fact, Sadaf. In India, हम जब snack के बारे में सोचते हैं ना, तो सारे rules जो है वो सब उड़ जाते हैं.
Snack mix से
हम सोचते हैं एक समोसा से क्या होगा खाने में, एक सेव पूरी से क्या होने वाला है. So that mentality is not going to change. But I will tell you one very interesting thing. So I've been following a lady called Jessie in house. I can't pronounce her surname, but she goes as Glucose Goddess on Instagram. I think Archit will really enjoy her. She basically is a scientist who's researched the effect of glucose, and she gives you solutions. So one of the things that she says is dress your carbs. Don't eat carbs by themselves. In India is famous for carb on carb, vada pav, samosa, aloo bhar diya maide mein. So what she says is start with a vegetable and like a few cucumber sticks or a little bit of a salad before you eat a carb snack. So the fiber coats your system and the absorption of the snack is slower. Never eat sweet things as a snack.
Yes. But ice cream snack.
When you eat, so that's what is happening, what people are doing. But if you want to consume sweet things, ideally consume them as a dessert after a meal because the absorption of sugar will be slower. As opposed to if you consume just like, आज मुझे snack चाहिए, ice cream खा लिया या cake या brownie, ऐसे कुछ, you just eat it at tea time by itself. It's a hit of sugar. And these spikes are actually what are dangerous for.
Nice. So, before we come to our last question, I have one very interesting question, which is that we talked about the Godrej report, we talked about the trends, we talked about data and everything we talked about. This report, whenever this comes out, who is this for? And what are your predictions as in the trends in the report? Like couple of predictions to hoga ki खाने में इस बार ये होने वाला है. So yeah, so these two things.
So the report is specifically for people in the food industry. So people in food media like yourself, journalists, food writers, people who write on food for various platforms, create content, whether it's podcasts or documentary films or video series or whatever. It allows, then of course it's for the food business, which is restaurants, food producing companies, small and big brands, home chefs, home bakers, anybody who's selling food or in the business of food. It's also a fantastic tool for hospitality institutions. So people who teach around food and beverage and students, of course. Okay. It's designed to help all of these people perhaps decide on where to invest their energies and business in the year to come. What should, say, for example, a small business look at investing in when it comes to something like new product development? Or like, say, for example, if you know millets is big and we are telling you millet-based snacks are big, you could perhaps look at innovating with millet-based snacks in the year to come. For content people, it gives you ideas on stories that you can work on, like pitch. You can, and you yourself have told me how you find it a great resource for something like ideas to pitch stories, ideas to create content on podcasts or videos even for people who create video content, reels, to plan campaigns around, online campaigns for content. It could be something that PR companies can use to advise their clients on both strategic business moves as well as how to promote specific things that they have in their basket of offerings. One of the, what I'll do is I'll use a trend to give you an idea. So we see pan-ready high flavor snacks will be sought after. Okay, what we see here is that in 2023, we will see snacks reinvented in a plethora of avatars to suit very demographic and dietary requirements. Convenience and taste will be driving factors, with consumers gravitating towards options that require the least distance between the pan and plate and strike high notes of flavor. Of offerings with novelty values such as local and regional flavored frozen kebabs and snacks will be an attractive and palate satiating proposition. So essentially, people who are in the snack business, small businesses, can look at doing regional flavors ka alag stuff. Like, for example, in Bombay, we have the Bihari studio who's doing a chicken litti, which I suggested to them, but it's doing really well for them. So they're stuffing a litti with chicken keema, and it's been doing really well since they announced it. So you can innovate with flavors if you're a small business. If you're a large business, you can invest in things that basically give the consumer high taste, safe, nutritious propositions with no preservatives and ease. Like, I don't want to spend too much time. Either I'll order in a snack or I will pick up something, quickly fry it up, serve it up with a dip. So when you think like that, and then you put yourself in your consumer's place, and then you think of how you can innovate using these things. So, for example, people who are looking for healthy options might appreciate a frozen millet cutlet, which you just need to fry up in a pan. A millet gives you that lovely crispiness on the outside, just like, a suji or a bread crumb would do. And it also gives you the gratification of knowing you've eaten somewhat healthier.
So, it's for everybody, seems like. Everybody who enjoys food. And how...
Oh, yes. And yes, classically, the last thing I should have said was that it's also for people who just want to know more about food.
I think everybody wants to know about food. That's simple.
Yeah.
Interesting, because it's the last segment of the podcast. And because you've been here, you know that we do favorite, over, and underrated. But today, it's different. Because we're talking about trends.
Okay.
And if I recall correctly, is a bunch of the questions from your survey. One of them talks about the trend where you would bet on. So I'm going to ask that. The trend that you would put your money on. Second, the trend that is overhyped, that you want to just die this year. And the trend that you want to pick up. So under over ही है अभी भी, but थोड़ा सा उसकी भाषा language change हो गई है. आपके सवाल है, देख लीजिए, आपके सवाल आपसे पूछे थे. अब उठ पागल के नीचे.
Yeah, I know. हाँ, you're just giving me a taste of my own medicine. So I'll start with the favorite. What I'm looking forward to, I think, is...
The trend that you would bet on.
The trend, exactly. The trend that I will bet on is pan-ready high flavor snacks.
What is the pan-ready high flavor snacks? बहुत इंग्लिश बोल दिया आपने.
अभी तो तुमको पढ़ के सुनाया. Pan-ready high flavor snacks are basically... cutlets, kebabs, anything that requires me open a packet, pan में उसको fry कर लो, microwave में उसको cook कर लो, and you have a meal ready in a few minutes. To go with it, I will say that the trend right after that is the other one that I will put my money on, which is demand for sauces and condiments. Because आप snack अकेले तो खाओगे नहीं. उसके साथ कुछ ना कुछ चटनी, सॉस हमें चाहिए होता है. Especially when it's something that's simple on flavor, you need that extra pop of flavor. So those are the two things that I will put my money on.
So many sauce companies have come in as well.
Yeah. Look, you've got, again, it's like इमली की सॉट लेके नींबू की चटनी और पता नहीं what all there is. Szechuan, of course, is तो right on top. Peri
a friend of mine who I was speaking with 2-3 weeks back, and we were talking about sauces. And because he runs a restaurant already, and he wanted to start a sauce business. And we were talking that how, without preservative, how can we do like sauces? So we were just talking about it. So yeah, and I was telling him the same thing. And I was like, dude, sauce is something which everybody wants. Ho gaya would do that legacy brands and the usual tomato ketchup, I think, sure they work, but I think if you add a little bit of extra bhut jholakia sauce on that, oh, मजा ही आता है.
अब आप वही एक्सरसाइज करो जो आपने तेल के साथ की. Visualize the shelf in your kitchen where you keep the sauces.
I have a lot of sauces. So oil, I have sauce and pickles में भरे पड़े हैं. I'll tell you. I have recently bought, Tabasco is a regular thing, so Tabasco and tomato ketchup, वो रहता है. Then I got a mustard ketchup, which is the kasundi which I get from Sia Park. Then I've got piri sauce, I don't know what that means. Then I've got bhut jholakia. Then I've got this couple of them from Viva as well, so they are those three. Then there were 3 sauces from Nando's and 2 from Nagin. So I've got a whole bunch of sauce. And I'm not, like, I would eat them with just sandwich only. But I am basically a very chatoda person. चटपट कुछ भी खिला दो मैं खा लूंगा.
पर आप उसमें अकेले नहीं हो.
हाँ,
पूरी
तो
इंडिया आपके साथ
me
है.
into India. तो वही हो जाता है. Oh.
Exactly. You are. I think we are all again hardwired for. We live in a country that is hot. We are hardwired towards chatpata because it gets the juices flowing in your mouth. It's cooling because it's spicy.
Country
so,
का पता नहीं है.
First thing you'll think of is that.
पता नहीं. हाँ, मैं तो हूँ बहुत ज़्यादा ही.
तुम तो हो, but I'm talking from सालों का experience यार. थोड़ा सा तो credit दे दो.
Trend that.
Okay, I noticed that.
Want to die down this year.
You know what I would really love, and this is not part of the trends report, but I will tell you that my pet peeve. ये जो reels की जो दुनिया है ना, जिसमें खाना ऐसे लोग फेंक रहे हैं, smash कर रहे हैं, पता नहीं. I wish it would go away. I feel it's very disrespectful towards food. And the other thing is that whole overeating वाला जो है ना, like marathon eating. Again, it's disrespectful to the people who produce your food.
Yeah.
You know, the gluttony that it represents. So I think those are two things I would like to see go away in a time when, you know, hunger is still a very prevalent thing in our country.
No, I agree.
Where people, I would like to see more finesse with stuff that people are putting up. But I guess that is something we don't have control over. But that's something I would love to see go away.
I mean, And the trend that you want to, like, underrated, that you really want to pick up this year.
It's not underhyped, it's just only starting out, is the demand for culinary knowledge and skills. I feel that as an industry, we don't invest enough time in studying regional food and flavors. And we need to change that because you have to respect. I'm not saying that there is anything wrong with innovation. Indian culinary culture rests on innovation. We've always taken what came to us and innovated with it, and new things have come. But when we explore ingredients, when we explore regional flavors, we need to give it the due respect of understanding it in its context and representing it accurately. I'm not using the word authenticity because I don't think that it is a correct measure, but accuracy certainly is. Like, you know, if you're picking up a certain spice or a certain dish that is specific to a region, understand it completely in its context and respectfully play around with it. Don't just fling it into some new this thing and maine naya item banaya hai types. Because what we do when we do that, especially because today everything is being recorded, right, in some format or the other, we then create misrepresentation. I remember you and I had a conversation, I think, on Halim and how we have different regional variations of Halim. But if we look on YouTube, it's homogenized because nobody's really bothered to get into the regional variations, understand them, and then explain them properly to us.
It's just Halim.
So
interesting.
And then just now recently somebody described khichdi as a stew.
Khichdi? I would put khichdi as I would put khichdi as like a vegetarian Halim, but how I would have put it as a stew.
Some Firangi magazine described khichdi as a stew. I forget which one just now, but it's a classic. How difficult it is. You just have to Google a little bit and you'll know that a lot of people describe khichdi as a porridge or a porridge-like consistency, which is to some extent better than saying khichdi is a stew.
ये जर्नलिस्ट भाई साहब ने चैट जीपीटी का इस्तेमाल किया होगा, इसीलिए भाई साहब लिखा. Thank you, this was fantastic. मतलब that's what we usually talk about cuisines and food and ingredients, but understanding the trend and how the things are changing, food's changing over the period of time is an important thing as well. Where can people find the Godrej Food Trends Report for their reference, and where will people find you?
The Godrej Food Report is available for download from vikhrolicucina.com after it launches. You can follow Vikhroli Cucina on Instagram as well and keep up on trends because we keep talking about trends and things playing out throughout the year. I am available on Instagram and Twitter as Rushina MG, and I'm also on Facebook as Rushina Munshaw Ghildiyal.
Lovely. So, अब चाहिए सोशल मीडिया की गलियों में जाएं लोग और छान मारे, ढूंढ निकालें लोगों को और फॉलो कर लें. और हम कहाँ मिलते हैं पता ही है, हम कहीं नहीं मिलते. मैं कहीं नहीं एक्चुअली मिलता हूँ. मैं लोगों से थोड़ा कम मिलता हूँ. नहीं, एक्चुअली बहुत मिलता हूँ.
तुम सभी जगह
हर जगह मिल लेता हूँ लोगों से. मैं
क्या बोल रहे हो?
खैर, मिलने मिलाते तो जिंदगी मिलने मिलाने की है. ऑन दैट मिलने मिलाने का नोट करते हैं दुकान बंद और मिलते हैं अगले हफ्ते.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network.
You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com.
You can also follow us on our social media. We are @IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.
And if you want to reach out to me on Twitter, I am Hussain Sadaf1, and on Instagram, I am Sadaf_Hussain. You can reach out to Archit
on Twitter @BandTofu and on Instagram @The Hustling Glutton.